October 5th will mark the 60th anniversary of the James Bond franchise. As an avid fan of the series, I have decided to commemorate that date by reviewing all of the films from my least favourite to my most favourite. Please be warned, these reviews will involve spoilers. Also, I will be including the 1967 James Bond spoof Casino Royale and the unofficial 1983 Bond film Never Say Never Again in my rankings. The Living Daylights is the 15th official James Bond film. In it, a renegade Russian general works with an international arms dealer to buy heroin using misappropriated Soviet funds. It is admittedly an overly complicated plot. However, it is also one filled with romance, intrigue, and suspense. Needless to say, The Living Daylights is something of a muddled film. A lot of the buffoonery and excess that dogged the Roger Moore era casts an unfortunate shadow over this film. This is especially evident when The Living Daylights moves to Afghanistan. The battle on the Russian airbase seems out of place with the rest of the movie. At this point, the film becomes a run-of-the-mill 80s action film and suffers as a result. Another problem, as I have mentioned before, is that The Living Daylights has an overly complicated plot. The Bond films have, of course, gotten away with complicated plots before, but that is because the plots were not the primary focus of these films. In Live and Let Die, for example, Dr. Kananga's heroin smuggling scheme is given only lip service because it is the relationship between Bond and Solitaire that is important. All this is not to say that The Living Daylights has a bad story. It is to say that the story wasn't told as well as it might have been. There is, however, a lot about The Living Daylights and its story that ought to be complimented. As mentioned before, this is a film filled with elements of romance, intrigue, and suspense. It takes its inspiration from the Bond novels and early films, especially from Russia with Love. The scene in which Bond confronts General Pushkin is perhaps the most intense in the series since the Connery era. It goes without saying that the scenes set in Europe and Tangiers are all brilliant. Imbued with a strong sense of intrigue and suspicion, these sequences remind me of the classic 1948 film The Third Man. The Living Daylights marked Timothy Dalton's debut as James Bond. For the most part, Dalton came as a breath of fresh air following more than a decade of the light-hearted shenanigans of the Moore era. Dalton brings a sense of violent ruthlessness and, conversely, humanity that had not been seen in the Bond character since On Her Majesty's Secret Service. This is a Bond who gets angry, who makes mistakes, who is tarnished by the very nature of his job. In one particularly notable scene, Bond creates a diversion by stripping the clothes off a young woman. You wouldn't see Roger Moore doing that sort of thing. Unfortunately, however, there are areas where Dalton's Bond falls flat. He lacks the required elegance and sense of sophistication required by the Bond character. Dalton's Bond dresses poorly in comparison to his predecessors. He's in bad need of a haircut and is severely lacking in the humour department. Audiences expect to be able to laugh during a Bond film, and Dalton's Bond fails to deliver. The focus of much of The Living Daylights is the relationship between James Bond and Cara Mallovi. Mariam d'Abo was well cast as the wide-eyed ingenue and concert cellist Cara Mallovi. She is beautiful but ultimately naive. Some have described Cara as annoying, but I think her behaviour fits perfectly with her character. Bond and Cara's relationship develops over the course of the film. At first, Bond uses Cara to track down Koskov, As the story progresses, however, Bond develops genuine feelings for her, and romance ensues as a result. The villains in The Living Daylight leave a lot to be desired. They are neither interesting nor menacing. General Georgy Koskov, played by Euron Krabbe, is slimy and treacherous, but he's portrayed as such a buffoon that he lacks any sense of menace whatsoever. Brad Whitaker, played by Joe Don Baker, is little more than an overgrown child who likes to play dress-up. Finally, Necros, played by Andreas Wisniewski, is little more than a cliched, muscle-bound, blonde-haired assassin. The Living Daylights supporting cast is, for the most part, impressive. John Terry's performance as Felix Leiter admittedly leaves very little impression. However, Thomas Wheatley's Saunders, John Rhys Davies' General Leonard Pushkin, and Art Malik's Kamran Shah are all memorable. Unfortunately, there really isn't anything interesting or impressive about the filmmaking in The Living Daylights. It is obvious that a lot of money and talent went into the making of this film. However, there is little genuine artistry in it. The filmmaking behind The Living Daylights, therefore, is very workmanlike, and that's perfectly fine. Ultimately, The Living Daylights is a good, but not great, James Bond film. It benefits enormously from the harder edge Timothy Dalton brought to the James Bond character, and from the themes of intrigue, romance, and suspense. Unfortunately, these positive attributes are somewhat sullied by a poor ensemble of villains and moments of excess or silliness that do not serve the overall tone of the film. My favourite moment of The Living Daylights is when Bond acts as a sniper in Bratislava, Czechoslovakia. This sequence, which was directly inspired by the short story that gave the film its title, shows us Bond as the professional assassin he is. Furthermore, it is a sequence filled with intrigue and suspense. My least favourite moment is Brad Whitaker. He is one of the weakest villains in the whole series. As I said before, he is an overgrown man-child.